The garage smelled like sawdust and motor oil at 11:30 on a Tuesday night when my world cracked open like a rotten egg. I was sanding down the edges of a cherry wood dining table, the kind of piece that takes 3 months to build and sells for what most people make in 2 weeks, when I heard voices drifting through the thin wall separating my workshop from the kitchen. "Mom, you can't seriously think he doesn't suspect anything." That was Emma, my 17-year-old daughter, her voice carrying that particular brand of teenage exasperation that could cut glass. "Your father is oblivious, sweetheart. Always has been." Tessa's voice, my wife of 19 years, dripped with the kind of contempt usually reserved for something you'd scrape off your shoe. "He's too busy playing with his little wood projects to notice what's happening in the real world." I set down the sandpaper, my hands suddenly feeling like they belonged to someone else. The cherry table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, every grain perfectly highlighted, every joint seamless. 3 months of work, and she called it playing. "But what if he finds out about Julian?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "But walls in these suburban houses are about as soundproof as tissue paper." Julian. My brother-in-law, Nessa's husband. The guy who showed up to every family barbecue in his BMW, talking about his law practice and his lake house like they were extensions of his anatomy. "He won't," Tessa said, and I heard the refrigerator door slam. "And even if he did, what's he going to do? He's a carpenter who works out of his garage. Julian has connections, money, influence. Your father has splinters under his fingernails and sawdust in his hair." I stood there in my workshop, surrounded by the tools I'd collected over 20 years, the workbenches I'd built with my own hands, the business that put Emma through private school and kept Tessa in her designer suits. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across everything I'd built. That's when I noticed Tessa's purse sitting on the workbench where she'd dropped it earlier. She'd been looking for her car keys, muttering about being late for something. The purse sat there like a loaded weapon, its leather flap slightly open. I'm not proud of what I did next, but pride was already bleeding out all over my garage floor. Inside the purse, beneath her wallet and makeup compact, I found an invitation printed on expensive cardstock, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. "Celebrating new beginnings," it read in elegant script. "Join us for an evening of joy and new chapters." The date was this Saturday. The location was Nessa's house, the mansion Julian bought with his law firm money in the fancy part of town where the houses have names instead of numbers. My name had been written on the invitation in Tessa's handwriting. Then it had been crossed out with thick black ink, the kind of deliberate deletion that leaves no room for interpretation. I stared at that crossed-out name, Cole Merrick, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak, exactly. More like the sound a house makes when the foundation settles, that deep groaning that tells you everything is about to be different. The voices in the kitchen had moved on to discussing Emma's college applications, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about Julian at last year's Christmas party, how he'd made that joke about upgrading when Tessa got her promotion to senior architect, how everyone had laughed. How I'd laughed too, because that's what you do when you're the guy who works with his hands while everyone else works with their minds. I folded the invitation carefully and put it back in Tessa's purse, exactly where I'd found it. Then I went back to sanding my cherry table, each stroke of the sandpaper deliberate and methodical. The wood grain emerged under my hands, beautiful and complex, the kind of pattern that takes decades to develop. By the time Tessa came into the garage 20 minutes later to collect her purse, I was humming an old Johnny Cash song and working on the table legs. She paused in the doorway, watching me work. "You're up late," she said. "Couldn't sleep?" I replied, not looking up from my work. "You know how it is, when inspiration strikes." She made a sound that might have been agreement and grabbed her purse. "Don't stay up too much longer. Some of us have real jobs in the morning." After she left, I kept sanding until my arms ached and my mind cleared. The cherry table was going to be beautiful when I finished it, the kind of piece that lasts generations, built to withstand whatever storms come its way. I had a feeling I was going to need that kind of durability in the days ahead. The next morning, I made coffee and eggs while Tessa got ready for work. She moved through our kitchen like she was already gone, checking her phone, gathering papers, existing in a space that barely overlapped with mine. Emma sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling through social media and ignoring the scrambled eggs I'd put in front of her. "Dad, can you drive me to school today?" Emma asked without looking up from her phone. "Mom's got an early meeting." "Sure thing, kiddo." Tessa looked up from her phone. "Actually, I can drop you off, Em. I'm going right past the school." "But Dad already said yes." "I know what your father said." Tessa's voice carried that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "But I have some things I want to discuss with you on the way." Emma shrugged and grabbed her backpack. They left together, Tessa's heels clicking across the hardwood floors I'd installed myself 3 summers ago. The house felt different after they were gone, like a theater after the audience leaves. I spent the morning working on a custom bookshelf for a client downtown, but my mind kept drifting to that invitation. Celebrating new beginnings. What kind of new beginning required crossing out someone's name? Around noon, I decided to take a break and grab lunch at Murphy's, the diner downtown where the coffee tastes like it was brewed in a boot and the gossip flows faster than the maple syrup. Murphy's is where contractors and tradesmen gather to complain about clients and compare war stories. It's also where you hear things. Big Mike was sitting at his usual corner booth when I walked in. Mike owns the boxing gym 3 blocks over and has the kind of weathered face that comes from taking punches for 30 years and giving back twice as many. He's also one of the few people in town who treats me like I have a brain between my ears. "Cole," he waved me over. "Just the man I wanted to see. You still interested in those boxing lessons?" I'd mentioned wanting to learn boxing a few months back, mostly as a joke about needing to work off stress. Mike had taken it seriously and kept bringing it up. "Maybe," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Depends on whether you think these old hands can learn new tricks." "Brother, those hands built half the custom furniture in this town. They can learn to throw a punch." Mike signaled the waitress for another coffee. "Besides, boxing isn't about the hands. It's about the mind, strategy, patience, knowing when to move and when to stay put." The waitress brought my usual, coffee black enough to strip paint and a turkey sandwich that actually tasted like turkey. While I ate, Mike told me about his latest batch of students, a group of teenagers whose parents thought boxing would teach them discipline. "Kids today," Mike said, shaking his head. "They think everything should be easy. They want to learn the fancy moves before they master the basics. They don't understand that real boxing is about fundamentals, footwork, defense, knowing your opponent." I was only half listening until he said something that made me look up from my sandwich. "Speaking of knowing your opponent, you hear about the Hartwell divorce?" Tom Hartwell was a plumber who'd done work for half the neighborhood. I'd always liked him. Solid guy, good with his hands, the kind of man who showed up when he said he would and charged what he quoted. "What about it?" "Turns out his wife was stepping out with her sister's husband. Tom found out when he walked in on them at his own anniversary party. Can you imagine? Your own anniversary party?" My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. How'd he find out? Security camera in his own house. He'd installed it to keep an eye on things while he was working late jobs. Never thought he'd catch his wife and brother-in-law planning their exit strategy right there in his living room. Mike leaned back in his booth, shaking his head. "The thing is, Tom's a smart guy. He didn't go off half-cocked. He gathered evidence, documented everything, played it smart. When he finally made his move, it was surgical, clean, effective. What happened to them? Wife's living in a studio apartment across town. Brother-in-law lost his contracting license over some financial irregularities that came to light during the divorce proceedings. Funny how these things work out. I finished my sandwich in silence, thinking about Tom Hartwell and his security camera, about evidence and documentation, about playing it smart instead of going off half-cocked. When I got home that afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the closet in Emma's old playroom, looking at the cardboard box labeled Security System. 6 months ago, Tessa had insisted we install cameras around the house after a break-in 2 streets over. Then, 3 weeks later, she'd decided the cameras made her feel like she was being watched and demanded I take them down. I'd removed the visible cameras, but I'd never gotten around to disconnecting the system entirely. The main unit was still in the basement, still recording to the hard drive I'd installed, still watching. I spent the next hour reactivating the system, checking connections, making sure everything worked properly. The cameras I reinstalled were smaller than the originals, less obvious, the kind that blend into crown molding and bookshelf corners. By the time Tessa got home from work, I was back in my garage, working on the cherry table. She found me there around 6, still in her business suit, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "How was your day?" she asked, the kind of automatic question married people ask when they've run out of things to say to each other. "Productive," I said, running my hand along the table's surface. "Sometimes the best work happens when you take your time, pay attention to details." She nodded absently, already checking her phone again. "I'm going out tonight. Book club." "On a Wednesday?" We changed the schedule, Elena's idea. Elena was Tessa's best friend, a real estate agent with perfectly styled hair and the kind of smile that never quite reaches her eyes. "We're reading something new, more contemporary." "What's the book?" Tessa paused, her fingers still moving across her phone screen. "It's complicated. You wouldn't like it." After she left, I went upstairs and checked the camera feeds on my laptop. The system was working perfectly, recording everything in high definition. I felt like Tom Hartwell watching his own life through a lens, waiting to see what story would unfold. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday morning brought rain and revelation in equal measure. Tessa left for work early, claiming a breakfast meeting with clients. Emma caught a ride with friends. The house settled into its empty day silence, the kind of quiet that makes you notice things you've been missing. I was replacing a broken faucet in the guest bathroom when I heard Tessa's phone buzzing from the bedroom. She'd left it charging on her nightstand, unusual for someone who typically kept her phone surgically attached to her palm. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Then again. Someone really wanted to reach my wife. I finished tightening the faucet connections and walked to the bedroom. Tessa's phone sat on the nightstand next to a glass of water and a book she'd been pretending to read for 6 months. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Elena Book Club. That's when I noticed the second phone. It was tucked under a stack of magazines in Tessa's nightstand drawer, the kind of basic smartphone you can buy with cash at any convenience store, the kind of phone someone uses when they don't want their regular phone to tell stories. My hands moved without consulting my brain. The phone was password protected, but Tessa had always been predictable with passwords. Emma's birthday worked on the 3rd try. The message history opened like a window into a parallel universe where my wife was someone I'd never met. 6 months of conversations with someone listed as J in her contacts. 6 months of planning, scheming, and casual cruelty that made my chest feel like someone was tightening a vice around my ribs. The messages started innocent enough, complaints about work, family stress, the usual stuff people share with friends. But by the 3rd week, the tone shifted. "Jay, your husband seems like a nice guy, but you deserve better." "Tessa, he's sweet, but he's not ambitious. I'm tired of being the only one with real goals." "Jay, some men are builders, others are dreamers. You need someone who matches your energy." I scrolled deeper, watching my marriage dissolve in real time through text messages. By month 2, they were meeting for coffee. By month 3, coffee had become lunch. By month 4, lunch had become something else entirely. J. The lake house is empty this weekend. Nessa thinks I'm at a conference. Tessa. Perfect. I told Cole I'm visiting my mother. I remembered that weekend. Tessa had seemed different when she came back. Lighter somehow, like she'd shed some invisible weight. I'd thought she was finally relaxing, letting go of work stress. Instead, she'd been letting go of me. The recent messages were worse. They talked about me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to navigate around. Julian, because by now I'd figured out that Jay was my brother-in-law, had strong opinions about my intelligence, my business, my worth as a human being. Jay, does he suspect anything? Tessa, Cole? Please. He's too busy with his little wood projects to notice what's happening in the real world. I could probably move you into the guest room, and he'd just ask if you wanted coffee in the morning. Jay, maybe we should test that theory. Tessa, soon, after the party. Nessa's planning something special for us. Jay, your sister always did know how to throw a celebration. The party. The invitation I'd found in Tessa's purse. Celebrating new beginnings. My crossed-out name suddenly made perfect sense. I took pictures of the messages with my own phone, documenting everything with the methodical precision I used for complicated woodworking projects. Evidence, documentation, playing it smart, like Tom Hartwell. The sound of a car in the driveway sent me scrambling to replace the phone exactly where I'd found it. I made it to the guest bathroom just as Tessa's key turned in the front door lock. Cole, are you here? Upstairs, I called back, fixing the faucet. Her footsteps moved through the house with purpose, heading straight for the bedroom. I heard drawers opening, the sound of her checking her secret phone, then silence. When she appeared in the bathroom doorway 5 minutes later, she looked perfectly composed. The mask was back in place. How's the faucet coming? Almost finished, I said, tightening the last connection. Just needed to replace a worn gasket. Sometimes the problems are hidden where you can't see them until you look closer. Something flickered across her face. Suspicion, maybe, or guilt. But it passed quickly. I forgot some papers for my meeting, she said. I'll probably be late tonight. This project is more complicated than we initially thought. After she left, I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the nightstand where she kept her secrets. 19 years of marriage, and I'd never really known her at all. I'd been living with a stranger who wore my wife's face and shared my bed and planned my replacement like she was redecorating a room. The rain kept falling outside, drumming against the windows with the kind of steady rhythm that makes you think about time passing, opportunities missed, chances that don't come around twice. I spent the rest of the day in my workshop, but I couldn't focus on the cherry table. Instead, I found myself sketching plans for something else entirely. Not furniture this time, but strategy. A blueprint for what comes next when you discover your life is a lie. By evening, I had a plan. Not the kind of plan that gets you arrested or ruins your daughter's opinion of you forever. The kind of plan that requires patience, precision, and perfect timing. The kind of plan that would make Big Mike proud. I was going to that party on Saturday night, not as the crossed-out husband who wasn't supposed to know about his own humiliation, as the guy who builds things to last, who pays attention to details, who knows the difference between surface problems and structural damage. Tessa wanted new beginnings. I was about to give her one she'd never forget. Friday passed in a blur of preparation and research. I rented a projector from the electronics store downtown, telling the clerk I needed it for a family slideshow. I tested the equipment twice in my garage, making sure I knew how to set it up quickly and efficiently. I also made some calls. Tom Hartwell owed me a favor from when I'd helped him install custom cabinets in his kitchen last year. He was happy to share some advice about evidence gathering and documentation, about making sure everything you do is legal and defensible. The key, Tom told me over beers at Murphy's, is to let them hang themselves. Don't do anything illegal, don't get violent, don't give them ammunition to use against you. Just document the truth and let the truth do the work. What if the truth isn't enough? Tom smiled, the kind of smile that comes from hard-won experience. Brother, the truth is always enough. The trick is making sure the right people see it at the right time. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you think about endings and beginnings. I loaded the projector and my laptop into a carrying case that looked professional and innocent. The kind of bag someone might bring to give a presentation at a business meeting or family gathering. Tessa spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on a black dress that cost more than most people make in a week. She looked beautiful, the way she'd looked on our first date 20 years ago, the way she'd looked on our wedding day. "You sure you don't mind staying home tonight?" she asked, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "I know family parties aren't really your thing." "I've got plenty to keep me busy," I said. "That cherry table isn't going to finish itself." She kissed me on the cheek, a brief touch that felt like goodbye. Then she was gone, her car disappearing into the evening traffic, heading toward her sister's house and the party that was supposed to celebrate my replacement. I waited 30 minutes, then loaded my equipment and drove toward the fancy part of town where Julian and Nessa lived in their mansion, with the circular driveway and the imported stone facade. The house was blazing with lights, cars parked along the street, the sound of laughter and conversation drifting through the windows. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at that house and thinking about the people inside. My wife, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law who'd always treated me like something she'd stepped in, all the friends and family members who'd known about the affair and said nothing. The projector case sat on the passenger seat beside me, loaded with 6 months of evidence and truth. Tom Hartwell was right. The truth was always enough. You just had to make sure the right people saw it at the right time. I grabbed the case and walked toward the front door. Time to crash my own replacement party. The front door of Nessa's house stood slightly ajar, warm light and conversation spilling out into the October evening. Through the gap, I could see the marble entryway with its crystal chandelier and the oil painting Julian had bought at some gallery auction, the kind of art that costs more than most people's cars and looks like something a talented 5-year-old might produce on a creative afternoon. I paused on the doorstep, listening to the voices inside. 30 people, maybe more, all gathered to celebrate my wife's new beginning. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were using Julian's house, bought with Nessa's inheritance money, to plan Tessa's escape from our marriage. The projector case felt heavier in my hand than it should have. Not because of the equipment inside, but because of what I was about to do with it. Once I walked through that door, there would be no going back. No pretending I didn't know. No more playing the oblivious husband who was too busy with his little wood projects to notice his world crumbling. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The conversation didn't stop immediately. It took a few seconds for people to notice me, for the realization to ripple through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. I recognized most of the faces, family friends, Tessa's co-workers from the architecture firm, some of Julian's lawyer buddies, neighbors from the old neighborhood where Tessa and I had lived before she decided we needed to upgrade our social circle. Tessa was standing near the fireplace, wine glass in hand, looking radiant in her black dress. Julian stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, close enough to claim territory. When she saw me, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and finally something that might have been fear. "Cole!" Nessa appeared at my elbow like a perfectly dressed guardian angel. "What a surprise! I didn't think you were coming tonight." "Last-minute change of plans," I said, hoisting the projector case. "I brought some equipment for a little presentation. Thought everyone might enjoy seeing some family memories." Nessa's smile faltered. She glanced toward Tessa, then back at me. Oh, that's sweet, Cole. But we already have entertainment planned for tonight. Maybe another time? This won't take long, I said, moving past her toward the living room. Just a few slides. I think everyone will find them very illuminating. The crowd split as I passed, conversations fading as if someone had flipped a switch. I could feel their stares, almost hear the questions forming in their minds. What was the carpenter doing here? What was in that case? And why did he look so composed when he should have seemed ashamed? I set the projector case on the coffee table and began unpacking equipment with the same methodical precision I used for complicated woodworking joints. The projector first, then the laptop, then the cables, everything connected with satisfying clicks and whirs. Cole, what are you doing? Tessa's voice cut through the silence. She'd moved closer, Julian trailing behind her like a well-dressed shadow. Just setting up some visual aids, I said without looking up. You know how I am with presentations. I like to be thorough. This is ridiculous, Julian spoke for the first time, his lawyer voice carrying the kind of authority that usually made people back down. Nessa, call security. This man is clearly having some kind of breakdown. I looked up from the projector and smiled. Security? At a family party? That seems a little extreme, don't you think? The projector hummed to life, casting a bright square of light on the white wall above the fireplace. Perfect placement, perfect visibility. Everyone in the room would have a clear view. Cole, please. Tessa's voice carried a note of desperation now. Whatever you think you're doing, this isn't the place. These are our friends. Our friends? I connected the laptop to the projector and opened the folder I'd labeled New Beginnings. That's interesting, Tessa, because according to the invitation I found in your purse, I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. My name was crossed out, remember? The silence in the room was complete now. 30 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I could smell expensive perfume and wine, and the kind of fear that comes when people realize they're about to witness something they can't unsee. The invitation was... Tessa started, then stopped. What could she say? That it was a mistake? That someone else had crossed out my name? We both knew better. I clicked on the first file. The wall above the fireplace filled with a screenshot of text messages, enlarged so everyone could read them clearly. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago. The conversation between Tessa and Jay was explicit in its planning and casual in its cruelty. Jay, the lake house is empty this weekend. Nessa thinks I'm at a conference. Tessa, perfect. I told Cole I'm visiting my mother. A gasp went through the room, like air being sucked out of a balloon. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God," and another person mutter something about not believing it. But mostly there was silence as 30 people read the evidence of my wife's affair, projected on the wall like a movie they couldn't stop watching. Nessa had gone completely still beside the fireplace. Her face was the color of chalk, her wine glass forgotten in her hand. She was staring at the messages, at her husband's name, at the casual way they'd planned their deception around her conference schedule. "This is fake," Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Anyone can fake text messages these days. I clicked to the next slide. Hotel receipts, all paid for with credit cards in Julian's name. Restaurants where they'd had lunch while their spouses thought they were working. A paper trail 6 months long and detailed enough to satisfy any forensic accountant. Cole, stop. Tessa moved toward the projector, but I stepped between her and the equipment. Stop what? Sharing family memories? But we're just getting started. The next slide was a photograph I'd taken through the window of the Riverside Motel on Thursday afternoon. Tessa's car parked next to Julian's BMW. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. on a day when she'd told me she was showing properties to clients, and he'd told Nessa he was in court depositions. You followed us? Tessa's voice was barely a whisper. I documented the truth, I said. There's a difference. Nessa finally found her voice. It came out as a croak, like she'd forgotten how to use it. Julian? Are these real? Julian looked like a man watching his life collapse in real time. His lawyer training kicked in, searching for arguments, technicalities, ways to make this evidence inadmissible in the court of public opinion. Nessa, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Really? I clicked to the next slide. Audio file this time, the sound of Julian's voice filling the room through the projector's speakers. She's the sister I should have married, Julian's recorded voice said. You're brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. Nessa's just comfortable, safe, boring. The wine glass slipped from Nessa's hand and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp and final, like something breaking that could never be repaired. You recorded us? Tessa was staring at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Security camera, I said. The one you wanted removed from our bedroom 3 weeks ago. Funny thing about technology, sometimes people forget to completely disconnect the system. The room had divided into 2 camps now. Half the people were staring at the wall, transfixed by the evidence. The other half were staring at Tessa and Julian, watching them realize their carefully planned deception had been exposed to everyone who mattered in their social circle. I clicked through more slides. Financial records showing money transfers from joint accounts, credit card statements for hotels and restaurants, phone records showing hundreds of calls between their personal numbers during business hours. 6 months, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. 6 months of planning, scheming, and laughing at the stupid husband who was too busy with his little wood projects to notice his wife was shopping for an upgrade. Cole, please, Tessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. We can talk about this at home, privately. Privately? I gestured toward the crowd of friends and family. But this is your celebration party, remember? Your new beginning? I thought everyone should see what they're celebrating. Julian made a move toward the projector, but 3 of his own friends stepped in front of him. Tom Bradley from his law firm, Mike Chen from the country club, even his golf buddy Rick Summers. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting the evidence, protecting the truth that was finally seeing daylight. Let it play out, Julian, Tom Bradley said quietly. You've done enough damage for one night. The final slide was a screenshot of the most recent messages between Tessa and Julian, plans for after the party, how they'd tell their spouses, how they'd handle the divorces, how they'd use Nessa's money to start their new life together. Jay, after Saturday, we won't have to hide anymore. New beginnings for both of us. Tessa, I can't wait to be done with this charade. Cole will never see it coming. The silence that followed was complete. 30 people processing what they'd seen, what it meant, how their neat social circle had just exploded into fragments that would never fit back together. Nessa was the first to move. She walked to where Julian stood frozen by the fireplace and slapped him across the face with enough force to echo off the marble walls. 23 years, she said, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. 23 years of marriage, and this is how you repay me, with my own sister? Nessa, Get out. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Get out before I call the police and have you arrested for theft. Theft? Julian's face went even paler. The money you've been transferring from our joint accounts, the credit cards you've been using for your romantic getaways, the lake house you bought with my inheritance. Nessa's voice was getting stronger with each word. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I may be boring and safe, but I'm not stupid. Julian looked around the room, searching for allies, for someone who might take his side. He found nothing but disgusted faces and turned backs. Even his lawyer friends were studying their shoes, already calculating how to distance themselves from the scandal. "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded like whistling past a graveyard. "Yes, it is." I started packing up the projector equipment with the same methodical care I'd used to set it up. "It's been over for 6 months. You just didn't know it yet." Tessa stood in the middle of the room like an island surrounded by hostile water. The friends who'd been laughing with her an hour ago were now looking at her like she was something distasteful. The co-workers who'd respected her professional success were reassessing everything they thought they knew about her character. "Cole, we need to talk," she said. "No, we don't." I closed the projector case and picked it up. "We needed to talk 6 months ago. Now we need lawyers." I walked toward the front door, the crowd parting again to let me pass. At the threshold, I turned back to look at the wreckage of the party, at the scattered friendships and broken marriages and shattered trust. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said. "I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And Tessa, you were right about one thing. This really is a new beginning." I walked out into the October evening, leaving behind the sound of raised voices and accusations and the kind of chaos that happens when carefully constructed lies finally collapse under the weight of truth. The cherry table would be finished when I got home. 3 months of patient work, every joint perfect, every surface smooth as silk, the kind of craftsmanship that lasts for generations. Some things are worth building slowly, others are worth tearing down all at once. The drive home from Nessa's house took 12 minutes, but it felt like traveling through different seasons. I left behind the chaos of raised voices and shattered relationships, driving through quiet suburban streets where porch lights glowed and families sat down to late dinners, blissfully unaware that their social circle had just imploded. My phone started ringing before I reached the first traffic light. Tessa's number flashed on the screen, then went to voicemail. Then rang again, and again. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had 7 missed calls and a string of text messages that progressed from pleading to angry to desperate. "Cole, please answer. We need to talk. This is insane. You've ruined everything. How could you do this to Emma?" Emma. My 17-year-old daughter who was spending the night at her friend Madison's house, probably scrolling through social media and complaining about homework, completely unaware that her parents' marriage had just been publicly executed in her aunt's living room. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at our house, the house I'd renovated room by room over 19 years, the kitchen where I'd installed custom cabinets and granite countertops, the hardwood floors I'd refinished twice, the deck I'd built so we could have barbecues and birthday parties and all the normal things families do. 19 years of building something I thought would last forever, gone in one evening with a projector and the truth. My phone rang again. This time it was Big Mike from the boxing gym. "Cole? You okay, brother? I just heard from Tom Bradley. He said there was some kind of situation at a party tonight. News travels fast. In this town? Hell, I probably know what you had for breakfast before you finish eating it. You want to talk about it?" I looked at my house again, at the warm light spilling from the windows, at the life I'd thought I was living. "Tomorrow, maybe. Tonight I just want to finish a project I've been working on." Fair enough. "But Cole, whatever happened tonight, whatever you did, Tom says you handled it clean. Professional. That matters." After Mike hung up, I sat in the silence of my truck and tried to process what I'd just done. 6 months ago, I'd been a husband and father living what I thought was a normal life. Tonight, I'd become something else entirely. Not a victim, not a fool, but a man who'd fought back with the only weapons that mattered: truth and timing. The front door opened, and Emma appeared in the doorway. So much for spending the night at Madison's. "Dad?" She walked toward the truck, her face uncertain. "Madison's mom got a phone call from Mrs. Chen. She said something happened at Aunt Nessa's party?" I got out of the truck and grabbed the projector case. Emma looked at it with the kind of curiosity that comes from growing up in the digital age, where everyone carries equipment that can change lives with the click of a button. What's in the case? Evidence, I said, the kind that changes everything. We walked into the house together. Emma went straight to the kitchen and started making hot chocolate, the way she'd done since she was 12, whenever the world felt uncertain. I went to my workshop and carefully stored the projector equipment, then stood looking at the cherry table I'd been building for 3 months. It was beautiful, every joint perfect, every surface smooth as glass. The kind of furniture that gets passed down through generations, that holds family memories and survives whatever storms come its way. Dad? Emma appeared in the workshop doorway, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Want to tell me what really happened tonight? I took the mug and sat down on my work stool. Emma perched on the edge of my workbench, her legs swinging like they used to when she was little and would come out here to help me with projects. Your mom and I are getting divorced, I said. No point in sugarcoating it or building up to it slowly. Emma was 17, not 7. She could handle the truth. Because of Uncle Julian? I looked up sharply. What do you know about Uncle Julian? Emma shrugged, suddenly looking older than her 17 years. I'm not blind, Dad. I've seen the way they look at each other at family gatherings, the way Mom lights up when he's around, the way she's been different lately, happier but not because of us. How long have you known? Suspected? A few months? Known for sure? About 3 weeks ago when I saw them together at Starbucks downtown. They didn't see me, but they were holding hands across the table. Mom was wearing the necklace she said she bought for herself. I set down my hot chocolate and studied my daughter's face. She had Tessa's eyes but my stubborn chin, and right now she looked like someone who'd been carrying a secret that was too heavy for her shoulders. Why didn't you tell me? What was I supposed to say? Hey, Dad, I think Mom's cheating on you with your brother-in-law. Besides, I kept hoping I was wrong, that maybe they were just friends, or planning some kind of surprise, or... She trailed off, shaking her head. But they weren't, were they? No, sweetheart. They weren't. Emma was quiet for a long moment, swinging her legs and staring at the cherry table. Is that why you built the projector presentation? To catch them? To document the truth, I corrected. There's a difference between catching someone and simply showing people what's already happening. What happens now? Before I could answer, car doors slammed in the driveway. Through the workshop window, I could see Tessa getting out of her car, followed by Julian. They were both talking animatedly, their voices carrying through the glass, but not clearly enough to make out words. Emma, go to your room, I said. Dad, I'm 17. I don't need to be protected from... Go to your room, I repeated, and something in my voice made her slide off the workbench without further argument. Tessa's key turned in the front door lock, followed by the sound of heels clicking across hardwood and Julian's deeper voice mixing with hers. They were in my house, in the space I'd built and maintained and thought of as sanctuary, planning their next move like generals after a lost battle. I walked into the kitchen and found them standing by the breakfast bar, still in their party clothes but looking like refugees from a natural disaster. Tessa's makeup was smeared, her perfect hair disheveled. Julian's tie was askew, his expensive suit wrinkled. Cole, thank God, Tessa said when she saw me. We need to talk about what happened tonight, about how to fix this. Fix it? I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my voice level. Fix what exactly? Your affair? Your lies? The fact that you've been planning to leave me for 6 months? It's not what you think, Julian said, falling back on the lawyer's instinct to argue even when the evidence is overwhelming. The messages, the meetings, you're taking everything out of context. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Context? Julian, I have 6 months of documentation. Hotel receipts with your credit card number. Photos of your cars at motels, audio recordings of you calling your wife boring and saying you should have married her sister instead. What context makes that acceptable? Tessa moved closer, her eyes pleading. Cole, I know how this looks, but it's not about you. It's about me, about what I need, about upgrading, I finished. About trading in the carpenter for the lawyer, about moving up in the world. That's not fair. Fair? I pushed away from the doorframe. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been asking for a divorce 6 months ago instead of planning your exit strategy behind my back. Fair would have been not using our daughter as a prop in your deception. Fair would have been not crossing my name off party invitations while you celebrated replacing me. Julian stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Look, Cole, I understand you're upset, but what you did tonight was legal, I interrupted. Everything I showed tonight was legally obtained evidence of your affair. No hacking, no breaking and entering, no invasion of privacy, just documentation of what you chose to do in public places and private spaces where you had no reasonable expectation of secrecy. You recorded us in your own bedroom. I recorded activity in my own house using security equipment I legally installed and owned. Check with your lawyer friends. They'll tell you the same thing. Tessa was crying again, but it felt calculated now. Strategic tears designed to manipulate rather than genuine emotion. Cole, please, think about Emma. Think about our family. I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about how she's been watching you two for months, knowing something was wrong but not knowing what. I'm thinking about how she's been torn between loyalty to both her parents while you used her as cover for your lies. We never involved Emma in this. You involved Emma the moment you decided to have an affair with her uncle. You involved her when you started planning to break up our family without giving her any preparation or explanation. You involved her when you made her complicit in your deception. Julian tried a different approach. What do you want, Cole? Money? The house? We can work something out. I want you out of my house, I said quietly. Both of you. Now. This is my house too, Tessa protested. I have rights. You have the right to legal representation and fair division of assets in divorce proceedings. You don't have the right to bring your lover into our home and plan your next moves in our kitchen. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at her standing in the kitchen where we'd shared 19 years of breakfasts and birthday cakes and quiet conversations over coffee. Where we'd planned Emma's future and discussed our dreams and built what I thought was a partnership. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You've been planning your new beginning for 6 months. Time to begin. Julian grabbed Tessa's arm. Come on. We'll go to a hotel, figure this out tomorrow. What about my things? Pack a bag. Everything else can wait for the lawyers to sort out. They left 20 minutes later, Tessa carrying a suitcase and looking back at the house like she was seeing it for the first time, or the last time. Julian loaded her bag into his BMW and held the passenger door open like a chauffeur. I watched from the living room window as they drove away, two people who'd blown up their lives for the chance to be together, finally getting what they thought they wanted. Emma appeared beside me, still in her pajamas. Are they coming back? Not tonight, maybe not ever. Good, she said, and the firmness in her voice surprised me. I'm tired of pretending everything is normal when it's not. We stood at the window together, father and daughter, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork and the complicated process of untangling 19 years of shared life. But tonight, for the first time in months, our house felt peaceful. Dad? Emma's voice was small in the darkness. What you did tonight at the party, was it wrong? I thought about the question, about the 30 people who'd witnessed the collapse of 2 marriages, about the truth that had finally been allowed to breathe. I don't know, I said honestly, but it was necessary. Outside, the October wind rustled through the trees I'd planted when Emma was born. trees that had grown tall and strong over 17 years of patient care. Some things take time to build, others take courage to tear down when they become rotten at the roots. Tomorrow, I'd start building something new. Tonight, I was content to watch the old world disappear into the darkness where it belonged. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes you believe in fresh starts and second chances. I woke up at 6, made coffee in the kitchen that felt different without Tessa's morning routine, and checked my phone to find 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from numbers I recognized and several I didn't. The news had spread through our social circle like water through a cracked foundation. Tom Bradley from Julian's law firm, Elena from Tessa's book club, 3 different neighbors from our street, even my cousin Danny from 2 states away, who somehow already knew the whole story. The messages ranged from supportive to shocked to accusatory. The supportive ones came mostly from other men who'd been in similar situations or suspected their own wives of infidelity. The shocked ones came from mutual friends who couldn't believe nice people like us could have such dramatic problems. The accusatory ones came from Tessa's allies, people who thought I should have handled things privately instead of airing our dirty laundry at a party. I deleted them all without responding. Emma came downstairs at 7, already dressed for school, moving through the kitchen with the kind of determined normalcy that teenagers use to cope with chaos. She made toast, poured orange juice, checked her phone with the casual efficiency of someone pretending her world hadn't shifted on its axis. "You okay?" I asked. "Define okay," she said, not looking up from her phone. "If okay means my parents are getting divorced and half the town is talking about it, then sure, I'm fantastic." "Emma, Dad, it's fine. Really." She finally looked at me, and I saw Tessa's eyes but my own stubborn determination. I'd rather have parents who are honest about being unhappy than parents who lie about being happy. She grabbed her backpack and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and you might want to check your email. Aunt Nessa sent you something this morning." After Emma left for school, I opened my laptop and found the email waiting in my inbox. The subject line read, "Thank you, and I'm sorry." "Cole," it began, "I don't know how to start this, so I'll just be direct. Thank you for showing me the truth about my husband, even though it destroyed my marriage. I'm sorry I didn't see it myself, and I'm sorry you had to be the one to expose it. I filed for divorce. Julian moved out yesterday and is staying at the Marriott downtown. I've frozen all our joint accounts and hired a forensic accountant to trace the money he's been stealing from our investments. You were right. He's been using my inheritance to fund his affair with your wife. I know this doesn't fix what they did to both of us, but I wanted you to know that Tessa won't be getting the soft landing she planned. Julian can't afford to support her now that his access to my money is cut off. His law firm is reviewing his position after what happened Saturday night, which is corporate speak for "you're fired, but we need time to make it legal." I don't know if we'll ever be family again after this, but I hope we can at least be allies. We both deserved better than what they gave us. Take care of yourself and Emma. You're both welcome at my house anytime. Nessa. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to my own lawyer with a note asking him to coordinate with Nessa's attorney on any overlapping issues. If Tessa thought she was going to walk away from our marriage into Julian's arms and bank account, she was about to discover that some bridges burn from both ends. The phone rang at 9:30. My lawyer, David Morrison, calling with updates that sounded like a tactical briefing. "I've reviewed the evidence you provided," he said without preamble. "It's comprehensive, well-documented, and legally obtained. Your wife's attorney is going to have a very difficult time arguing for spousal support given the circumstances. What about Emma? Custody shouldn't be an issue. Your daughter is 17, old enough for her preferences to carry significant weight with the court. Given that she's been living primarily with you and seems to want to continue that arrangement, I don't anticipate problems. And the house? That's where things get interesting. The house is in both your names, but you've made all the improvements and renovations. Your wife's affair and deception could be considered dissipation of marital assets, especially if we can prove she spent joint funds on the relationship. Combined with her reduced earning potential now that her affair has become public knowledge. David trailed off, but I understood the implication. Tessa's carefully planned upgrade was turning into a very expensive downgrade. How long will this take? With this much evidence and her obvious culpability? 6 months, maybe less if she's smart enough not to fight the inevitable. After David hung up, I went out to my workshop and stood looking at the cherry table. 3 months of patient work, every detail perfect, every joint seamless. It was ready for its final coat of finish, the step that would protect it from weather and wear and the passage of time. I was applying the first coat when Big Mike appeared in the doorway. "Thought I might find you out here," he said, stepping into the workshop and breathing deeply. Nothing like the smell of wood and varnish to clear a man's head. "Shouldn't you be at the gym?" "Closed on Mondays, remember? Besides, I wanted to check on you after the weekend excitement." Mike picked up a piece of sandpaper and examined the table's surface with the eye of someone who appreciated craftsmanship. "Beautiful work. This for a client?" "Was going to be for our dining room," I said. "Now I'm not sure what to do with it." "Keep it, sell it, give it away, doesn't matter." Mike set down the sandpaper and looked at me directly. "What matters is that you finished what you started. You saw a project through to completion even when everything else in your life was falling apart. Is that supposed to be profound? It's supposed to be true. You know what separates winners from losers in boxing? It's not strength or speed or natural talent. It's the ability to keep fighting when everything hurts, when you're tired, when you want to quit. You just proved you have that quality." I applied another coat of finish to the table, watching the wood grain emerge under the protective layer. "I don't feel like a winner, Mike. I feel like someone who just burned down his own life." Sometimes that's what winning looks like. Sometimes you have to tear down the old structure before you can build something better. Mike stayed for another hour, helping me apply the final coats of finish to the table and talking about everything except divorce and affairs and public humiliation. We discussed Emma's college plans, the boxing lessons I'd never gotten around to starting, his ideas for expanding the gym. Normal conversation between friends, the kind of interaction that reminds you the world keeps turning even when your personal universe implodes. After he left, I cleaned my brushes and tools, with the methodical care that had become second nature over 20 years of woodworking. The cherry table sat in the center of my workshop, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, perfect and complete and ready to last for generations. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Cole, this is Elena, Tessa's friend. We need to talk. There are things you don't know about what really happened. Can you meet me at Murphy's at 2 p.m.? Elena. Tessa's best friend, the real estate agent with the perfect smile and calculating eyes. The woman who'd been part of Tessa's inner circle, who'd probably known about the affair from the beginning and said nothing. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "See you at 2. Some conversations you avoid, others you walk toward with your eyes wide open, ready for whatever truth they might reveal." After Saturday night, I'd developed a taste for uncomfortable truths. They might burn going down, but at least you knew what you were swallowing. The cherry table would be dry by evening, ready to be moved wherever it needed to go. Like me, it had been transformed by fire and pressure into something stronger than it was before. Time to find out what Elena thought I needed to know about my own life. Murphy's diner at 2 in the afternoon was nearly empty. Just a few construction workers grabbing late lunch and an elderly couple sharing pie and coffee in a corner booth. Elena was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back booth where the lighting was dim and conversations stayed private. She looked different than she had at parties and social gatherings. Less polished, more nervous. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her typical real estate agent uniform. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. You said there were things I didn't know. I'm listening. Elena fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to sound crazy, but you need to know the truth about how this all started. I know how it started. My wife decided she wanted an upgrade and found it with my brother-in-law. That's not how it started. Elena finally looked at me directly. It started with me. The diner suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear the coffee machine hissing, the elderly couple's quiet conversation, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. What do you mean? Elena took a deep breath like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. 3 years ago, you did some work for my father, custom cabinets for his kitchen renovation. Do you remember? I searched my memory. 3 years ago, dozens of projects, hundreds of clients. Vaguely. What about it? You recommended a contractor for the electrical work, someone you'd worked with before, someone you trusted. The contractor did shoddy work, caused a fire that burned down half my father's house. Dad lost everything, his home, his workshop, 20 years of collected antiques. The insurance company blamed faulty wiring and refused to pay. The memory came flooding back. Jim Patterson, an electrician I'd worked with on several projects, reliable, professional, reasonably priced, until he started drinking and cutting corners and nearly got someone hurt. I'm sorry about your father's house, I said, but I don't see what that has to do with... My father had a heart attack 6 months after the fire. The stress, the financial loss, the depression of losing everything he'd worked for. He died in the hospital alone, because he couldn't afford proper care after losing his insurance settlement. Elena's voice was steady, but tears were running down her cheeks. You destroyed my father's life with your recommendation, so I decided to destroy yours. The pieces started falling into place like dominoes in my mind. Elena's friendship with Tessa, her constant presence at social gatherings, her advice about marriage and relationships and personal fulfillment. You manipulated Tessa into the affair. I cultivated her dissatisfaction, Elena corrected. I listened to her complaints about your lack of ambition, your blue-collar job, your satisfaction with a simple life. I encouraged her to want more, to believe she deserved better. I introduced her to the idea that marriage should be passionate and exciting, not comfortable and stable. And Julian? Julian was easy. He's always been attracted to Tessa, even when you were dating. All I had to do was create opportunities for them to spend time together, to see each other as alternatives to their current situations. I suggested the book club that never read books. I recommended the restaurants where they had their lunches. I even suggested the motel where you photographed them. I sat back in the booth, trying to process what I was hearing. My wife's affair, the destruction of my marriage, the public humiliation at Nessa's party, all of it orchestrated by someone seeking revenge for a tragedy I'd barely remembered. Why are you telling me this now? Elena wiped her eyes with a napkin. Because it worked too well. I wanted to hurt you, to make you feel the kind of loss my father felt. But I didn't want to destroy Emma or Nessa or the other innocent people who got caught in the crossfire. So you're feeling guilty. I'm feeling responsible. There's a difference. I thought about Tessa and Julian, about their 6 months of planning and scheming and casual cruelty, about the messages I'd read, the conversations I'd recorded, the way they'd talked about me like I was something to be discarded. You may have created the opportunity, I said finally, but they made the choice. You didn't force Tessa to have an affair. You didn't make Julian steal money from his wife. You just showed them a door they were already looking for. Does that make it better? It makes it complicated. I signaled the waitress for coffee, needing time to think. What happens now? Do you plan to tell Tessa and Julian about your role in this? I don't know. Part of me wants to confess everything, to take responsibility for what I started. Part of me thinks it would just make things worse for everyone. It would definitely make things worse for you. Tessa's going to need someone to blame when her new life doesn't work out the way she planned. Julian's going to need a scapegoat when his law firm fires him and Nessa takes him for everything he's worth. If they find out you manipulated them into destroying their lives. Elena nodded miserably. I know. I created a situation I can't control anymore. We sat in silence for a few minutes, two people contemplating the wreckage of carefully laid plans. Elena had gotten her revenge, but it had cost more than she'd expected. I'd gotten my truth, but it came with complications I was still processing. For what it's worth, Elena said finally, I am sorry about your father's house and your father. I should have recommended someone more reliable. Jim Patterson fooled a lot of people before his drinking got out of control, including me. That doesn't make you responsible for what happened to my dad. And it doesn't make what you did to my marriage right. No, it doesn't. Elena stood up and left money on the table for her coffee. I'll understand if you tell Tessa and Julian about this conversation. I probably deserve whatever happens next. After she left, I sat in the booth for another hour, drinking coffee and trying to understand how a simple contractor recommendation had led to the destruction of multiple families. The elderly couple finished their pie and left. The construction workers paid their bill and went back to work. The diner filled with the usual afternoon crowd, people living normal lives without the complications of revenge and manipulation and carefully orchestrated deceptions. By the time I drove home, I'd made my decision about Elena's confession. Some truths are meant to be shared, others are meant to be carried quietly, like weights that remind you of the consequences of your choices. Tessa and Julian had made their bed through their own actions and decisions. They could lie in it without knowing about Elena's role in arranging the mattress. But I would remember, and I would be more careful about who I trusted, who I recommended, and who I let close enough to my life to do damage from the inside. The cherry table was dry when I got home, its surface smooth and protected, ready to withstand whatever storms might come. Like me, it had been transformed by fire into something stronger than before. Some lessons are worth the price you pay to learn them,